King Charles has just activated the Crown's legal machinery to do the unthinkable: freeze Prince Harry's entire asset portfolio. Following a massive private equity scandal, the King is using sovereign immunity to bypass standard laws and neutralize the Sussex's offshore influence. Is this the final financial blow for the Duke? What we are witnessing right now behind palace walls is not just another tabloid spat or a minor clash over royal protocol. This is the calculated, unprecedented deployment of centuries-old royal prerogative to dismantle the financial foundation of an estranged prince. For years, the public believed the rift between Montecito and London was purely emotional, a war of words fought across tell-all memoirs, television interviews, and streaming documentaries. But beneath the surface, a far more dangerous battle has been brewing, rooted in high-stakes global finance, opaque corporate structures, and an escalating regulatory disaster that now threatens the very institutional integrity of the British Crown itself. The catalyst for this extraordinary royal intervention is the sudden, catastrophic collapse of a high-risk private equity venture tied directly to Prince Harry and his inner circle of American investors. While the Sussexes attempted to build an independent, self-sustaining financial empire far from the strict oversight of the royal establishment, their commercial operations have instead spiraled into an international quagmire. Sources tracking the situation confirm that the venture, initially billed as a groundbreaking investment vehicle designed to bridge transatlantic philanthropic goals with aggressive wealth generation, quickly became entangled in a web of dubious offshore shell companies, questionable cross-border transactions, and high-yield speculation. When market volatility struck and liquidity dried up, the entire facade crumbled. Whistleblowers within the financial sector began pointing fingers at reckless management practices, restrictive non-disclosure agreements, and millions of dollars channeled through jurisdictions notorious for lax regulatory oversight, including Delaware, the Cayman Islands, and private trusts across Europe. Internal leaks from Buckingham Palace suggest that the fallout went far beyond poor investment returns or private business failures. The true crisis erupted when forensic financial assessments revealed that the private equity firm's underlying operations were actively lobbying foreign regulatory bodies and leveraging Prince Harry's royal title to solicit capital from controversial foreign entities. This direct monetization of royal status, paired with geopolitical entanglements, represents a catastrophic breach of the royal family's strict neutrality clause. For an institution whose very survival rests on remaining entirely above partisan politics and commercial compromise, Harry's offshore ventures represented an existential liability. Palace insiders report that high-level memos circulating among the king's private secretaries painted a terrifying picture. Royal branding was being used as collateral to secure speculative debt, and creditors were beginning to look toward British royal trusts to recoup their catastrophic losses. This specific scandal became the ultimate tipping point for King Charles after years of mounting frustration, private heartbreak, and quiet endurance. Throughout the initial aftermath of the Sussexes' departure, the king adopted a posture of strategic patience, hoping that time, distance, and independent commercial reality would allow his younger son to find stability. Charles had absorbed the public accusations, ignored the barbs thrown in print, and maintained a policy of dignified silence. But a reckless private equity meltdown carrying potential legal, constitutional, and financial liabilities for the British Crown crossed a line that no reigning sovereign could ever tolerate. King Charles is not merely a father trying to manage family dysfunction. He is the custodian of a 1,000-year-old constitutional apparatus. The moment Harry's financial dealings threatened to drag the crown into international regulatory litigation, personal sentiment had to be ruthlessly extinguished in favor of institutional survival. In response to the escalating crisis, King Charles convened an emergency legal summit at Sandringham. Far away from the cameras and the prying eyes of the London press, the king gathered his most trusted constitutional advisors, senior barristers, and the elite legal team representing the Duchy of Lancaster. The agenda was simple, brutal, and unprecedented. Execute a comprehensive audit and tactical freeze on every single asset, account, and financial interest connected to Prince Harry that remains within the reach of the British legal system. For decades, the finances of senior royals have been shielded behind complex layers of royal warrants, private estates, and hereditary trusts. Now, the Duchy of Lancaster's legal experts are systematically identifying and securing dormant bank accounts, residual commercial royalties, and long-standing ancestral trust funds that Harry has continued to draw upon or quietly use as collateral for his international business ventures. Under updated 2026 royal protocols, King Charles is actively working to construct an impenetrable legal wall between the monarchy's finances and the Sussex brand. These newly formalized protocols give the sovereign sweeping administrative authority to instantly isolate and neutralize any royal asset that poses a reputational or financial threat to the realm. By invoking these measures, Charles is effectively demonstrating that the crown can cut off financial lifelines with surgical precision, shutting down offshore conduits conduits, before creditors or international courts can attach royal properties to the Sussexes' mounting debts. Every residual tie, from historical property deeds to intellectual property rights retained in the United Kingdom, is now under the direct scrutiny of Crown administrators, leaving the Duke of Sussex's legal team scrambling to comprehend the sheer scale of the legal machinery that has just been turned against them. Across the Atlantic in Montecito, the initial reaction to the Sandringham directives was one of utter disbelief, followed by immediate panic. For years, Prince Harry and his business strategists operated under the assumption that the king would never take overt, punitive financial action against his own flesh and blood. They believed that the protective umbrella of the royal name would forever shield their commercial ventures from genuine scrutiny in London. But as British financial institutions began receiving formal notifications from the Duchy's chancellors, freezing transactional access and placing historic trust funds into state escrow, the reality of their isolation set in. The Sussexes found themselves cut off from the very financial infrastructure that had quietly backstopped their post-royal lifestyle, setting the stage for an explosive legal confrontation unlike anything modern Britain has ever seen. To understand why this legal siege is so uniquely devastating for Prince Harry, one must understand the sheer constitutional power of sovereign immunity. In standard financial litigation, when assets are disputed, frozen, or placed into receivership, both parties argue their case in open civil court under standard corporate statutes. But the British Crown does not operate on an even playing field with private citizens, even if that citizen happens to be the son of the king. Under the sovereign grant mechanisms and long-standing legal precedents governing the monarch's prerogative, King Charles holds the exclusive authority to administer and regulate properties, trusts, and titles intrinsically tethered to the royal estate. By invoking these historic powers alongside modern legislative updates, the king has bypassed standard commercial courts entirely. The Duchy of Lancaster and the Crown Estate answer directly to the sovereign's constitutional mandate, meaning that asset distributions, discretionary trusts, and royal clearances can be suspended instantly, without the need for a lengthy public trial or protracted judicial review. This puts Prince Harry's high-priced California legal team in an unprecedented and deeply precarious position. For weeks, top entertainment attorneys, corporate litigators in Century City, and Delaware trust specialists have been working around the clock to construct a defensive perimeter around the Sussexes' remaining global portfolio. Their immediate goal is ring-fencing their American media contracts, private equity stakes, and charitable foundations to prevent the Crown's financial freeze from triggering cross-default clauses across their international debt structures. When an offshore venture collapses under regulatory scrutiny and its primary benefactor has their foundational capital frozen at the source, banks and institutional lenders rapidly issue margin calls. The Sussex attorneys are desperately attempting to argue that British assets held in hereditary trusts constitute private personal property rather than royal estate chattel, preparing potential challenges in international commercial arbitration. Yet, the reality facing the Sussex legal defense is stark. Enforcing American court judgments or international arbitration against sovereign Crown property in the United Kingdom is practically impossible. The Crown is protected by centuries of sovereign immunity doctrine, which explicitly prohibits the seizure or forced liquidation of royal assets to satisfy private creditors or foreign legal claims. Prince Harry's American advisors are finding out the hard way that while aggressive legal maneuvers and public relations campaigns might work against Hollywood studios or Silicon Valley startups, they crumble when directed against the ancient, unyielding architecture of the British state. Every legal avenue the Sussexes attempt to open in the United States hits a jurisdictional brick wall the moment it crosses the Atlantic, leaving their international investments increasingly exposed, isolated, and drained of liquidity. This dramatic escalation has sparked intense debate among royal historians and constitutional observers regarding the king's ultimate objective. Is this financial siege designed to force Prince Harry to his knees, compelling him to abandon his commercial misadventures and return to the United Kingdom under strict royal supervision? Or does it represent the final, irrevocable severance of all remaining ties? There are those within palace circles who argue that Charles, still possessing a father's instinct, hopes that cutting off the flow of institutional wealth will force Harry to dismantle the high-risk offshore operations that have made him vulnerable to financial predators. Under this theory, stripping away the financial illusion of independence is the only way to save Harry from complete financial ruin. Conversely, harder voices within the establishment view this as the definitive surgical strike, a calculated maneuver to permanently exile the Duke from the royal balance sheet, ensuring that when the private equity house of cards inevitably collapses, the Crown will not suffer even a single scratch. Nowhere is this hardline institutional resolve clearer than in the stance taken by the Prince of Wales. Reports from the inner sanctum of Kensington Palace indicate that Prince William has given his absolute, unwavering support to the king's aggressive financial strategy. William has long maintained a zero-tolerance policy toward toward any commercial exploitation of the royal brand, recognizing that every time the Sussex name is attached to an offshore fund, a corporate pitch, or a venture capital gamble, it devalues the integrity of the monarchy. Sources close to the Prince of Wales reveal that William viewed the latest private equity crisis not merely as an embarrassment, but as an existential threat to the future throne he will one day inherit. In William's eyes, the era of half measures, sentimental compromises, and endless negotiations is permanently over. The monarchy must protect its future at all costs, even if that means severing the financial lifeline of his own brother. Working behind the scenes to execute this strategy are the Crown Commissioners and specialized forensic auditors, who have been tasked with cataloging and scrutinizing every single cent of the Sussex's remaining British financial ties. This exhaustive financial inquiry extends far beyond obvious bank accounts. The commissioners are auditing residual royalties from royal publications, intellectual property registered under British jurisdiction, and the intricate web of discretionary grants that were established during Harry's years as a full-time working royal. Every historical allowance, every tax exemption tied to his former royal roles, and every leasehold agreement connected to royal land is being meticulously disassembled. By closing these financial conduits, the King and the Crown Commissioners are systematically eliminating any possible vector of liability, ensuring that not a single penny of British royal funding can be dragged into foreign regulatory investigations or offshore liquidation proceedings. As details of this high-stakes confrontation begin to filter into the public consciousness, the perception of King Charles's reign is undergoing a profound and historic transformation. For years, critics characterized Charles as a transitional figure, a monarch hesitant to make ruthless decisions or alienate his youngest son. But by prioritizing the institutional sanctity of the crown over personal family sentiment, the king is demonstrating an uncompromising strength that has surprised both his supporters and his detractors. The British public, increasingly weary of the endless commercial drama emanating from California, has broadly rallied behind the king's decisive action. What the world is witnessing is a sovereign who understands that his ultimate allegiance is not to familial comfort, but to the constitutional survival of the British state, setting the stage for a dramatic endgame that will redefine the House of Windsor forever. The permanent fallout from this unprecedented asset freeze will fundamentally and irreversibly alter the relationship between Montecito and London for generations to come. Up until this moment, despite the bitter public exchanges and the physical distance across the Atlantic, an unspoken financial umbilical cord remained intact. Prince Harry was still anchored to the realm by hereditary trust arrangements, historic estate dividends, and the tacit understanding that the crown's immense wealth stood as an ultimate backstop against total insolvency. That illusion has now been completely shattered. By freezing these assets and sealing the financial borders of the royal estate, King Charles has converted what was once a private family tragedy into an absolute institutional divorce. The bridges have not merely been burned. The very foundations on which they were built have been legally excavated and removed. For the Sussexes, the consequences of this financial isolation are already threatening their day-to-day reality in California. Maintaining an ultra-elite lifestyle in Montecito requires an astronomical amount of liquidity. Between private security teams, high-powered public relations firms, international travel, and the immense overhead of their sprawling estate, Harry and Meghan operate at an annual burn rate that demands continuous, guaranteed capital. When their private equity ventures were flourishing, they could leverage their proximity to the crown and their ancestral assets to secure credit lines and venture backing. But with those British assets locked behind the impenetrable wall of sovereign immunity and their offshore investments crumbling under regulatory scrutiny, the Sussexes are facing an unprecedented liquidity crunch that threatens the survival of their entire independent brand. Faced with this existential financial squeeze, royal observers are bracing for an inevitable counteroffensive from Montecito. Throughout every previous conflict with the royal establishment, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle have turned to their most potent weapon, the global media. There are already whispers in media circles that the Sussex camp is preparing a high-stakes public narrative designed to frame this financial seizure as an act of calculated economic warfare. We could soon see a barrage of exclusive interviews, explosive tell-all features, or even a targeted documentary series detailing the battle over the royal purse strings. In this anticipated countermove, the Sussexes will likely attempt to portray the king's invocation of sovereign immunity as an abuse of monarchical power, painting themselves as modernizing victims crushed by an archaic and vindictive institution. However, this media-first strategy carries immense, unprecedented risks for the Sussexes. In the past, the public sympathized with emotional grievances and family drama, but the global climate has shifted dramatically. Attempting to generate public sympathy over frozen multi-million-dollar trust funds and offshore private equity failures in the middle of widespread economic hardship is a deeply flawed public relations gamble. Hollywood studios, streaming platforms, and major commercial brands have grown increasingly wary of Sussex-related drama, recognizing that audiences are experiencing acute fatigue with the ongoing royal feud. If Harry chooses to launch another scorched earth media campaign over his seized assets, he risks alienating the very American commercial partners he needs to survive financially, leaving him more isolated than ever before. This brings us to the ultimate question at the heart of this historic showdown. Has King Charles saved the reputation of the British monarchy, or has he created an irreparable rift that will haunt his reign forever? Looking through the lens of British constitutional history, Charles's decisive action aligns perfectly with the ruthless survival instincts that have preserved the House of Windsor for over 1,000 years. From the abdication of Edward VIII to the structural reforms of the 20th century, the monarchy has always prioritized institutional permanence over personal sentiment. By cutting off Harry's offshore entanglements and neutralizing the private equity threat, the king has demonstrated to the British public, parliament, and global allies that the crown cannot be bought, leveraged, or compromised by speculative finance. Yet, the human cost of this institutional victory is undeniable and devastating. King Charles has protected the throne, but in doing so, he has likely lost his younger son forever. The legal barriers now erected between the Duchy of Lancaster and Prince Harry ensure that any future reconciliation cannot simply be solved over a private family dinner at Balmoral. It would require unwinding complex legal decrees, lifting sovereign asset freezes, and untangling years of bitter public financial litigation. The Duke of Sussex is now, for all practical purposes, completely cast out from the royal machinery that raised him, left to navigate the turbulent waters of global commerce without the protective shield of the British crown. As the dust begins to settle on this unprecedented legal confrontation, one thing is abundantly clear. The golden age of post-royal commercial exploitation has come to a catastrophic end. King Charles has proven that while Prince Harry may carry the blood of kings, the sovereign power of the crown belongs exclusively to the institution. Now, we want to hear from you. Did King Charles make the right decision to invoke sovereign immunity and protect the monarchy's finances, or has he gone too far by cutting off his own son in the wake of this private equity scandal? How do you think Prince Harry and Meghan will respond in the coming months? Share your thoughts and theories in the comments below. If you found this deep dive analysis insightful, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on all notifications so you never miss an update on the high-stakes power struggles shaping the future of the British royal family.